So guys, thanks again. I think most of you by now know me. I introduced myself previously. So today I'm quite excited because earned value is one of those very simplistic concepts, and the math behind it is quite easy. The problem is always that implementation of taking earned value from theory into practice. And it's funny, I can see a lot of practitioners, even senior guys, really sometimes struggle with that transition to go from theory and take earned value and really use it on a project. So today I think what I want to do is just integrate those two worlds for you and show you. So I'm going to start with earned value, just explaining it again from my point of view. For a few years, I've struggled to really understand the value of it, and it took me a while. So I've got my own way of defining earned value. So I would like to share that with you, and I want to open up the conversation. It's quite informal. You guys are more than welcome to chip in and ask questions and stop me. It is the end of the year, so please don't ask too difficult a question. My mind is already hovering close to the holiday. So as we go along, please, I invite you guys. You are more than welcome to ask questions and get clarifications as we go along. I'll also put a few questions to you so that you guys can stay awake, seeing as we are going into the graveyard shift. So I've given you that sheet, which is the earned value sheet, just so that you have reference to those values and all the earned value metrics. So I'm going to ask here and there, I'm going to ask you guys questions. So you need to have your calculator or your brain close by during the session. All right, firstly, just to recap on what we did last time, those of you who were here, those of you who weren't, remember I spoke about project control as being one of these knowledge areas inside integration management of PMBOK. And if you remember correctly, it is that area which allows a project manager to monitor and control a project. So earned value is simply a technique that fits right into this project control unit. So it's just a technique that a project manager can use to monitor and control a project, but using comparable units. And I'll explain this a bit later, this word comparable units. You'll understand exactly what it means later on. As I said last time, project control stands on two legs. It's a planning on the one side and then the actual. So we can't just have one side. We need both sides of that coin. And those of you who were here will remember this example that I showed you. Who were here previously? Who saw this? Are you a complete new group? Okay, great. So then we can do the case study again. So the case study that I have there is a unique project that, if you look at it, it's a 10-month project. And the value of that project is 10 million. Now, the question that I ask, let me just give you more information. In the first month, or the second month of the project, we can note the following progress. The equipment, which is now 9 million worth of equipment, was delivered to the site. It has been claimed as part of the certificate. So in terms of the value of this project, 9 million of the 10 million has been spent. On the other hand, there's a small building that also needs to take place during this 10-month period, but that hasn't started yet. So my question to you is, if you have to set up a progress report for this project in month 2, what will be the percentage complete? Should be simple. Have I floored you? When are they graduating, Dion? Tonight. So you've got the knowledge now. Don't be scared. Think about value, for instance. What percentage of value has been completed? 90%? Value, I've got a 0. So I've got a 90 and a 0. What else? Any other takers? So it depends on the metrics that we use to measure, but it can be 20% if you use time elapsed. And the last time I think I ranted about half an hour on time elapsed. I'll tell you now why. I won't rant again. So time elapsed is the one measure. Then we have value based, meaning the value of the project, which is 10 million. And now we said 9 million of this has already been spent. So that gives me 90%. Do you agree? And then if we look at work-based or effort-based, what effort has been expended on this project? Nothing. No man hours. Maybe 1 or 2 in offloading the piece of equipment, but nothing more. So how is it possible that we can have on a project percentages of 20, 90, and 0? And we are saying that all 3 are correct. Say again? Depends on the metric we're using. Okay? Explain a bit more.
In a context.
Okay, I like that. Good. So in other words, what's happening here is I've shown you actual performance. So remember this previous slide I said, what is project control? To be able to monitor, plan and monitor a project, we need planned versus actual. So I've only given you one dimension. I've given you actual, and I've given you 3 different metrics. So in other words, I haven't given you the planned. So that's why it doesn't really make sense. Now, in the previous session, and that's why I use this example, so we've learned that actual performance can be articulated using various metrics, of which I've shown you those 3. Only 2 are important. The reason I don't like time elapsed is because it's like a broken watch. So a broken watch will show the time correctly twice in a 24-hour cycle. The same with time elapsed. It'll only be correct at the beginning and right at the end, 0 and 100%. In between, it doesn't tell us anything. It tells us that time ticks away with due regularity. But now that we have a firm grasp of the obvious, we can move on. So that's obvious. We don't need to state that. And also, the other thing that we learn, or that we learned the previous time, is the fact that we cannot articulate the actual performance in absence of the planned. Do you agree? That's extremely important, because if we do, it's nonsensical. And also it leads to tension, because people think that there's something that we can gather from this. And then lastly, the third thing that's extremely important is we need to compare apples with apples. And these 3 metrics can't be compared with each other, because now we are trying to compare pears with apples with bananas. It's 3 different metrics. So what we should do is we can compare the planned value versus the actual value. That's apples with apples. We can compare planned work-based versus actual work-based. Now we are talking apples with apples. And I cannot begin to explain to you the frustrations that we sometimes have in meetings. Some of my colleagues are sitting here as well, quantity surveyors that can attest to the, senior guys in the industry sometimes tries to compare value with time elapsed or value with work-based in high-level meetings. And these things takes up hours, and everybody's fighting because they bring these items to the meeting, and then they ask the question, but the money spent on this project is now 80%. Why are we only 20% in terms of the program? Or the time elapsed is now 80%, but we've only spent 20% on this project. Those are metrics that we can't integrate. They can't be compared with each other. And then they take weeks and weeks to delve into this, and everybody's mad and everybody's shouting at each other. So that's actual footage of me there in the back at one of these meetings, because that's typically what I just realized is that we can't compare these metrics. Planned with actual inside each of these metrics, yes, then it's telling us something, you agree? Then we can say, okay, but what's the variance now? Because we planned to do 90%, we have done 90%. That means what's the variance? 0, we are on par. We've planned to do 0 in month 2. The actual is 0. What's the variance? 0. We are actually on schedule. So this next slide was just where I showed you the planned curves there. You can see there in month 2, just find my cursor here. So there in month 2, it's 0%, that's the planned. So the actual is also 0, so we are on par because I have apples with apples here, work-based with work-based. There I have 9 million planned at the top, and also my actual in month 2 was 9 million. So I am on par. This is extremely important to understand before we go into earned value. But I think you guys get the gist of it. It's so important to have a good foundation for understanding how to measure actual versus planned, because this is the essence of earned value. So what I've got for you here is a case study, just to make it easy, and then I'll step into a slightly more complex project right at the end. So I'm just going to show you this to get down to the nitty-gritty and the foundation of earned value, and then we'll step up into a very complex project, and I'll show you the fundamentals obviously doesn't change. So this is a app development project, which I know nothing about, because I'm from the construction industry, but I've specifically used this example, which is a bit more IT orientated. The planned duration of this project is 5 months, or 4,000 man-hours. How did I calculate those 4,000 man-hours? Very simple. I've got 5 developers. They are going to work 8 hours per day for 20 days a month. Those were my assumptions. So if you tally that up, it comes to about 800 hours a month, which they are going to work, which for the 5 months gives us the 4,000 in total. These guys are costing me about 125 per hour. It's just theoretical. All my IT friends, I know you guys are definitely not that cheap. The budget is then 500,000 for the 5 months for these 5 developers. So again, you are now, put yourselves into the shoes of a project manager. This team has been assigned to you. Those are your resources. The 125 is what you need to pay your own resources. So the budget on our side is 500,000. I just want us to focus on that for now. Forget about whatever. Obviously, we're not going to sell this to a client for 500,000. So just focus on internal in our own company now. This is what we need to pay these guys to develop this app for us. All right, the next sheet, just to get you all familiar, and I've spoken to Dion, you guys have done earned value, so I believe you are comfortable with the jargon. For those of you who aren't, I've given you a sheet there just to also distinguish between the old values, which I've shown in brackets, and then the new values. So the first one there, just want to make mine a bit bigger, is that budget at completion. What would be the budget at completion of our development project? 500,000, very simple. Then we have planned value. What is the planned value? What would be the planned value for month 1 in our project? 800 hours. Multiplied 125, it's about 100,000 a month. Okay, so planned value, month 1 would be 100,000, month 2, 200, 300, 400, 500. So I've made it very, very simple. Also known as the budgeted cost of work scheduled. Which one did you guys use, the PV or the BW PV, okay. So MS Project still uses the old values. That's why I added them in there, but I also prefer the PV, AV, EV. Okay, and then we have the planned completion or percentage complete, which is PC. We've got our earned value, which I'll explain a bit better than just percentage multiplied by the budget. Then we have actual value, which is the actual cost of work performed, you know, and then we go into all the metrics, which is the estimated completion, estimate to complete, the schedule variance, the cost variance, and all those metrics, which I believe the students here are quite familiar with. Okay. So this brings us to a planned value curve that looks like this. You agree? Very simple. Now, in month 3, let's look at the status there. We say that this project is now 50% complete in month 3. When we look at our expenses, we've paid out 350,000 actually to our developers. So earned value for me essentially asks this question. It asks, how much completion or completion value did I earn for my effort? And then secondly, how much value did I earn for my spending? That's my personal definition. You guys can write it down. So I say earned value for me is, it asks the question on two sides. It says, firstly, how much effort did I spend for the value that I've earned? And secondly, it asks, how much money did I spend or value did I spend for the value that I've earned? So it looks at those two angles. So the first question we must ask on this project is, how much value did we earn for our effort? So if we can trust the objective measure of 50%, how much value, how much completion value did we earn? 250, which is half of our budget. Good. And now we ask, how much did we spend to earn it? 350. So that gives us our graph. And at this point, once we have those three metrics, you'll know we can now extract some valuable information from this project. So initially we say we've planned to do 300,000 worth of value at month 3. You agree? How much did we do? So in other words, the effort that we put in, do you guys know what that effort is? How many hours did these guys spend? We're not sure. Agree? We don't really know. Because somebody has given us the 50%, and let's say that is objective. It means irrespective of what these guys have spent, they could have spent 1,000 hours perhaps on this project in that first, well, in that month or up to there. In that last month, I mean. So they could have spent much more than what we've planned for. It doesn't matter, because what have we earned for that effort? You agree we've only earned 50%, we've only earned the 250. What does that tell us about the project in terms of progress? At 250? We are behind. Why? Why are we behind? What did we plan to do? 300. What did we do? Only 250. So that means we didn't reach the level of completion we would have wanted. You agree? So we are behind. Secondly, what did we spend? What did we spend to earn a value, a completion value of 250,000? 350. Is that a good thing? Why not? Because we are spending more money then we are really earning in terms of value. What could be the reasons for that on this project? More effort, we're not working efficiently. We need to pay the developers more. They are working overtime perhaps, or they're working longer than we planned, or we've got a 6th developer and not 5 anymore. So many reasons for that actual value. But the fact is, can you see that we are not getting value for our spending, and also we're not getting value for the effort, whatever the effort was, we don't know. But this indicates to us that we are not getting enough value for effort, because we're supposed to be at 300,000 and we're not. And now, as you guys will know, it opens up all these nice metrics that we can impress everybody with. I've got all my schedule variance and budget variance that you guys have told me now that we are behind. And as you can see, you were quite correct. We are behind, and we are also over budget in terms of this project. So can you see the value of earned value? And I can see it's one of those things that you need to get used to it. And the more and more you work with it, the math is quite easy, it's quite simple. Even the principles are quite simplistic. But I'm gonna ease you into the application. So just to show you, would that be helpful to us? Let's say in month 2, we've got a figure like this, whereby actual spending was 275, and the planned was 300. So I've got a missing earned value. Would this be helpful? Where's the accountants? What would an accountant think when they see this? They would think there's a saving, agree? And they would think that this forecast will lead to a saving right at the end, because we are now below what we plan to be. But as a project management professional, you guys would agree that this isn't really helpful. What do we need? We need that earned value metric. And what changes now from this previous picture? Why is it a loss? Good. So we are behind. Budget, will we still finish under the 500,000? What would answer that question? What metric? Estimate at completion. Yes. So if we do a projection from here, because we are late, that 250, the earned value, tells us we are late. You agree? Because it's less than what it should have been. We should have been at 300. We're not. So we know we're behind. So even though the spending is lower than the plan, it's still higher than earned value. So in your own minds as well, whenever you work with earned value becomes your foundation. You measure everything against that. So planned value, earned value, actual value, earned value. All right, never make the mistake of trying to do planned value, actual value. It doesn't really tell us anything. So earned value is always your base. And now you guys can see that actually we are behind. What does that mean? It means we're going to end 1 month later. Well, half a month actually. Who's going to pay the developers for that half a month? We are, and you can see that in the estimate to complete, which is at 550,000, because we are behind. Now, earned value pitfalls. So this next session, I just want to show you some of the pitfalls and why earned value can become quite difficult in the industry and in application. I always say this is when EV turns to BS. So don't let your EV turn into BS in practice, please. So the first pitfall is the objective measuring of earned value. So let's say in month 1 of this project, our development project, You get onto the development site, and the guys have logged 800 hours. So what would be our actual value? You get onto site, they show you, yeah, we did work 800 hours. What would be our actual value? 800 hours. You agree? Or then the value. Let's use the hours for now. So that would be actual value. 800 hours, or then translated into the budget will be 100,000. Okay. What is our planned value in month 1? Also 100,000. So let me just make a dot over there. PV is also 800, also 100,000. What is our earned value? What did we earn in that month 1? What portion of completion did we earn? 20%. Why? Sorry, say again, 30. 20%, which is 100,000 in value, which is 800 hours. Why? Why do you say this? Do you know that the 800 hours that these guys worked all contributed towards completion? Let's assume that these guys, for 400 hours of the month, man hours now, so it can be one guy or it can be two that only played a portion. But let's say the man hours total, 400 hours, they were playing solitaire and battlegrounds and whatnot, as developers do. You know, they're IT specialists. They can link up a LAN quickly and play a few games. Would you agree that we are not accurate in terms of our earned value? Why? Because although they've done 800 hours, you agree they have, we must pay them for that 800 hours. But how many hours really contributed towards completion? Only 400 hours, you agree? Because 400 hours they were playing games. So this is the essence of earned value that sometimes gets lost in practice, guys, is the fact that we must focus on an objective measurement so that we know how to really find out how many hours did these guys really work towards the project. How can we do that? What is the solution here? We need to think. We need to think a little bit further and ask ourselves, how would we know how much these guys contributed towards? What measure can we put in place that can tell us objectively how far they've come? Any IT guys here that can assist us, because I also don't know.
You probably go for incremental deliverables.
Good. Milestones. Very good. So milestones is something that we can set objectively, and it can be something like, all right, design needs to be finished in this first phase. We're going to spend 800 hours. Plan, that's our plan. But the measure of whether we have achieved that portion is a quick yes or no. Did we sign off the design with the client, for instance? Secondly, can be, let's do the graphics of this app. That's the second milestone. That's another 800 hours. It's a quick, you agree, objective. Is the graphic complete and signed off by the client? The third thing may be the development of the first frames or whatever. But can you see that all of a sudden now we've got an objective measure, where previously we didn't. If we just look at hours, it's not really effective and it's not objective. So this is the first mistake that a lot of people make with earned value in the industry, is they fail to bring it back to measurable objectives that can be objectively measured. So that is the solution. We need to build objectively measurable metrics into our planning. And a good way to do that is to schedule, actually. Question?
I just want to find out, but don't you think it's a bit difficult, especially in a creative space, to measure end value, where somebody's doing design, where it's not cut out as to although you've given them a time frame, but obviously it's a creative space.
Very good. Good point. That is the challenge of the project manager in that space. So you will have to find a way of translating that back to a measurable objective. So even in my own company, I value certain objectives for my employees, let's say. Where in big corporates, sometimes you find this culture where people value the amount of time that you sit at the office, at the desk. So the guys clock in at 6 o'clock in the morning and they are on Facebook and playing solitaire, and then they clock out 7 o'clock. And the powers that be think, well, that guy is really doing well. He's always here. But would you agree that we can't measure just on hours? So you have to say, listen, these are the outputs that I want to achieve, rather than time spent at a desk. So in project management, it's exactly the same. We have to find, even in a creative space, it may be pages of code, for instance. Look, it's going to be 10,000 pages when this thing finishes. So that means 100 pages of code is already 10% of the total, or something like that. But even pages of code might not be an efficient measure. So even in a creative space, usually a sign of where somebody accepts the creative deliverable that you've given, that would be a milestone. All right, second pitfall is apples with apples. We've spent some time with this earlier as well. So in terms of earned value, we can actually integrate any measure with time. That's the essence. We need to integrate something with time. That can be man hours integrated with time. It can be cost integrated with time. It can be length of meters of pipe integrated with time. So as long as we take a metric and integrate it with time, that's the essence of it. But what really matters is that we should always compare apples with apples. So if we consider our case study for a moment again, let's say we have our cost budget of 500,000, but the client in this instance is going to pay us 550. So that's our budget. You agree? Now we tender this to the client who's going to pay for it. And that tender includes a 10% profit margin. So don't get confused now between earned value and these metrics. So this is a common mistake that I see in the industry as well. So now we've got, this is not apples with apples. This thing contains profit, and that's why if we want to use this, then everything should be based on this, and we should extrapolate our cost to a value that includes profit. So the golden rule is simple. Use whatever we have, which is usually the cost, because that's easy. It's easy to measure, and we use that as the metric. Don't get confused with the metrics, as I've shown you in the previous example. Don't get confused with man hours versus values, etc. These things must be comparable. So the rule there is we need comparable units. That's the essence of earned value for me. All right. Lastly, before we move to the more complex projects, I'm going to show you a very simple earned value exercise. I want your brains to think. And we're going to incorporate everything that we have learned up to now. And this is an example that's quite close to home, because my kids like to play with marbles, and they tend not to pick it up afterwards. So I've got an example, and I thought maybe I must get it to this level, and then we go to the complex exercises. Right, so it's not to insult anybody's intelligence. If anything, I'm insulting my own intelligence because I've struggled with earned value in practice for years. And I thought, how can I explain this to my kids? So let's say the kids need to pick up, or they need to pick up 100 marbles. I give them 1 hour, 60 minutes of time, 100 marbles to pick up, and let's say I'm going to pay them 20 Rand if they do their bit. After half an hour, I walk into their room and I check on their progress. What is the planned value? At half an hour? 50. So they should have picked up 50 marbles. Let's say they only picked up 10. That's round about here. Would you agree that marbles in this instance is a measurable objective? Measurable metric? Objectively measurable? I can go and count them. So it's very simple for me to extract earned value. They've only picked up 10. Where should they have been? 50. What is the actual value? Why? Actual value? What is it costing them? It's costing them time, would you agree? So what does it cost them up to now? 50%. Because they've spent half an hour. So for me, actual value would be here as well. Because if I translate the amount spent into marbles, that's the comparable unit. It means that they, at this point, have spent time enough to have picked up 50 marbles. So they're not working efficiently. And in the end, they will end up at a point where they could have picked up 200 marbles for the time that they've spent. So remember that actual value, efficiency. Planned value there, progress. So they are behind schedule, very far. This means that they are not spending their time efficiently. And I have to relate time, because that's their value, into marbles, which is the 50 marbles. Okay. Easy? It's not that easy. I know. All right, so let's look at our case study, and I'm going to show you guys how to do this in Microsoft Project and Excel. Again, I'm back at the app development. So the first step that I'm going to take here in Microsoft Project is just to go and create my resources. This is something that you guys can do. Agree? So I've got there Jacob, Cyril, Musi, Julius, and Patricia. They are my 5 resources, the developers. They are work resources, and they are costing me $125 an hour. And I've got overtime there as well. Very simple. I've created those 5 resources. Next up, I'm going to do my schedule. And what I've done there is I've simply calculated 5 phases of development. That can be anything as we mentioned earlier. So the one can be design, and then frames, and then develop. It doesn't matter. So I've just divided them generically into 5 distinct phases. Each phase is going to take 20 days. Then what I've done is I've just assigned those resources to each activity. So very simple. I believe you guys have done the MS project, and this is really basics. I think you are all capable of creating resources with your schedule and then assigning them. Once we've done that, those 3 steps, we've actually now integrated cost with time, which is what we need for earned value. You agree? And we've got all the elements now in place for us to do a earned value management system. And you'll see how easy project actually makes this for us. What are our objective measures in this instance? It's each one of those activities. You agree? That's why scheduling is so powerful. And it's more than just an inflated to-do list. So it actually shows us that we can tick off those activities and ask the question, did we complete this activity, yes or no? So those are the measurable units. We've loaded them with cost over time. So we have the integration. And the next step is that I simply extract my earned value metrics from it by using the task view of MS Project. If you guys want to, at the end, I can quickly show you in MS Project. I've got it on the computer. If you have any doubts on where to get that, it's just a view. And the task usage view, you can write it down because that's your friend in MS Project. That's where all the juicy information lies. And there we have the planned values. Can you see? It differs now slightly from the 800 per month because I've just used the 1st of January, and obviously I've used 20 days. I mean, there might be more than 20 work days. February, for instance, is only 20. Then we have 22. So it differs slightly, and we're going to end there in the 20th of May. So my hours differ slightly from the 800, but it doesn't matter. So this is accurate, actually. And then I've got my values there in terms of the cost. So this is what it's going to cost me each month for the hours that the guys are going to work. And there's my information. There's my planned value curve. You agree? And that's my objective measure. So next up, I'm going to update my project. So I'm going to draw my time now line in March. That's month 3. And I'm going to say what actually happened. Can you guys see what happened there? In accordance with my baseline, I am not finished yet with that phase 3 development. So already you know we are slightly behind in terms of progress. So if I go back to my task view after the update, there's all the information that I need. So it shows me the actual value, planned value, earned value. So earned value now is based on the actual performance percentage complete against my activities. So it's very objective. If I've done my update correctly, obviously. Actual value also, because it measures my actual payments. And these guys have now worked longer hours than the effort that they actually got in terms of completion. Also, what we can do in MS is if one of your resources, let's say you have to substitute Jacob for someone else, Praveen, for instance, and Praveen is a bit more expensive, then we can bring that resource in, assign it, and then it will reflect in the actual cost immediately. So it'll spread Praveen's cost now over the activities that he's going to do, and we will see now a rise in the actual cost because we are paying this guy more. And remember, what did we plan for? We planned for Jacob, who is only 125 an hour. So the actual is actually different. We can bring that in, and it's measured immediately. Then once I've entered all of that, I can use the standard MS Project dashboard, if you like. I don't like it very much. If you look at it, you're quite limited in terms of the functionalities of the graphs in Project. I don't know why. I can definitely make it look better than that, but still you are limited. So I prefer actually to go to Excel with my data. But if you guys want to, this is just, I clicked on the earned value report in MS, and this is what you get. So there you can see all the values, actual value, estimate at completion, everything, the graphs. Some of them are hidden now, that's why I say I don't like the view. But you can get all these metrics that you want at the press of a button. So when I do this in Excel, this is what it'll look like. What can you tell me about this project if you look at it? Progress? Ahead or behind? Behind? Why? Because we've only earned 280. Where should we have been in terms of progress? 320. So we are definitely behind, and you saw that in the schedule as well, remember? And then in terms of budget, overspending. Why? My actual value is equal to my planned value. Why am I behind budget? Say again. Good, okay. So you almost stepped into that trap. The earned value must be measured with actual value. All right. So what I told you is I said planned value and actual value is the same. So be careful. That doesn't mean we are on budget. All right, so earned value, there's a cog in your mind that needs to shift. And the more you use it, the quicker you will obviously be able to find those metrics. So if I look at this, I can immediately say, behind progress, and I look at earned value, and I look at actual, and I say, definitely we are going to overspend. We are paying these guys more for what the effort that the completion that we have earned. All right, and then lastly, you can use a dashboard like that I've got in Excel. So I've just taken all my MS project values into Excel. Again, I'll show you guys how to do it, and if you want to, I can share that Excel dashboard with you if you want to play with it. So there you can see the metrics that I've got, the actual earned value and planned value. I've translated it into percentages, which is also good. And then I've given you the metrics there in terms of schedule variance, cost variance. I don't do the indexes. It's sometimes difficult for people to read. It's not stakeholders, project management stakeholders. So I tend to find that they like to see these worded dashboards. It can be read better by an external person who's not a project manager, and I mean who sometimes is one of the stakeholders in a project. So I prefer to use that. And there you can also see the estimate at completion and the estimate to complete. Everything automatically calculated. All right, so I'm going to end off, guys, with this slightly more complicated project. I'm going to show you the same fundamentals and how it can be applied here. So this is now a pipeline project. We also did this case study previously with MS Project. So you can see it's a bit more complicated. I've rolled up all the pipe sections, but underneath each of them, there are also a number of activities that needs to be completed. Second step, created my resources. Why? Because that is the key that integrates effort, man hours with cost over time. It's as simple as that. In this instance, I've got slightly more complex resources, can you see? It's not only the work resources in terms of people, it is now material. I've got cost resources there, overheads, I've got work resources as well, equipment, people, a lot of items, and I've priced them each as per the cost. So again, nothing difficult in terms of fundamentals, would you agree? It's simple resources with their cost. Secondly, I just go and I assign them to my activities. So even though I've got slightly more activities, it's a simple exercise of saying, what do I need to excavate here? TLB, 2 laborers. What do I need to lay the pipe? Well, I need the pipe material. I need 2 laborers as well, plus the TLB. So each and every activity, I just look at it, I assign the resources. And once I've done that, I can again extract this information, all my earned value metrics, at the press of a button. So I simply go to the task view. You can see I roll up my whole project so that I've got the values over each month. If you want to, you can open it up and you can go and delve into each activity if you like. So you can even isolate sections and do earned value on a section of the project if you really want to. So there you can see I've extracted the man hours plus the cost and then the earned value. Just take note. So in projects that earned value, the planned value is also cumulative. So those are the values per month, and those are the values already accumulated up to the last point. I then use my Excel sheet, and I simply copy those values and I paste them in there per month. And then I'll show you my Excel sheet. Once I've done that, it's almost an automatic process. So now I have this curve, planned value. This looks slightly more than an S-curve, but because we've got these short durations, we can't really form a very nice S-curve for you. Now I'm going to do an update. Draw the status line, look at each activity, find out where we are. And if I go back to my task usage view, I have these metrics that I simply read off and punch into Excel. So who can tell me what's going on this project? Progress. So earned value is 62. Planned value was 114. So immediately you know we didn't get quite to our planned. So progress-wise we are behind. Secondly, if you look at actual cost, you'll see there it is also 86, meaning we are spending a bit more. So we're not working as efficiently as we would have wanted. And this is the value of earned value. The fact that if I present this at a meeting to somebody who understands the metrics, you can immediately see what's going on this project. And it's objectively measured by my schedule. So I've got the backup to and the foundation for good information and outputs. And then step 5 is that you can impress your boss with your earned value dashboard. That guy is really impressed. So there we go. All the metrics are there. You can see we are behind in terms of budget, and we are behind in terms of the value, the effort, the progress. And then I've got my other metrics measured as well. And very important, guys, is not to leave it there. So never think mechanically in terms of project management. Always ask the question, because that's the value of earned value. It shows us on a high level that there's something wrong in this project. But somebody needs to go and delve into the detail and ask the question, what went wrong? Why do we have a progress delay and a cost overrun on this project? And again, MS Project is extremely helpful in this regard because we can build in metrics, as I've done over there, to go and ask the question, where are there duration variances on my project? And if you look at those activities there, can you point out to me where they are? The first one, I think, is that excavate for pipe trench. There's a 2-day duration variance. That means, and you can see it there on the baseline as well, it's extending past the baseline. So we've only allowed for 10 days. It's taking us 2 days longer. What does that mean in terms of cost? Those resources are there working 2 days more. That TLB is costing me per hour. So if it's working there, it is generating cost for which I'm not going to get any value. So I've only allowed for 10-day period there. Also, where else? I see no other time. So why would there be cost variances on items where there's no duration variance? And you'll see there, if I look at my cost variance KPI, those unfortunate souls that's quite unhappy there, they just indicate wherever we have a cost variance, meaning a positive cost variance there means that we are overrunning the cost in terms of what we've planned. So let's take a look at the bedding of the pipe trench there. It's got no duration variance. It means we did it in the time that we planned, but there's a cost variance of about 4,400. What could be the reason for that? Think resources. Why would my resources be more expensive? Say again. VAT went up. So it's back to our Pravin example. So it might be that my resource, the TLB or something that I'm using there, is causing the expense to increase. I know for a fact in this example, so when I did the update, I thought I'm going to get a TLB for 330 rands per day. In the end, I could only get one for 400. So in the update, I changed the actual cost, which is part of my update. And that's why I have cost differences there. So I'm actually spending more than I budgeted for. And that's also reflected in our earned value. But can you see, so the earned value just showed me, if we can go back there, it showed me there's a problem in terms of my budget. You agree? And when I go back to my schedule, I've got all the information to go and pinpoint why is there a problem. And to go back to the resources, it's quite easy to go and find that resource, but complex to explain to you, because I'll have to open up those columns, but you can just go and do some filters and check where do I find this cost variance, what is the common resource that's causing this, and you'll find out that it's the TLB. So the TLB is costing more. So if we sit in a meeting, this is what you can show to the high-level stakeholders, your senior guys. They are not interested in the details. But if asked, then you can always come back to this and explain, why is there a cost difference? Why are we behind? And this will tell us, and we can also go and ask the question now, why did that take longer than planned? Maybe it wasn't our fault. Maybe it was rain, or maybe it was the client didn't provide us with details or whatever. So this allows us to, can you see, we can now control. We can monitor our project, we can control it, and we can take measures to bring it back. Because now we've got all the information at our fingertips, and nobody's guessing what is going on. All right, have I bent your brains a little bit? I hope so. Thank you, guys. Is there any questions, anything you want me to quickly show you in projects? I've brought all my examples. So I went through it now because previously we did some intensive MS project work. I don't want to repeat all of that. But if there's something specific you would perhaps like me to show you, I've got everything here I can show you. Or if not, then you guys are more than welcome to ask a question. As I said, no difficult questions because it's almost December. But if you have easy questions, I'll be glad to answer them. Dion always asks difficult questions.
You have your spreadsheet here.
I have.
I think two things. If you could quickly just illustrate how you got to your in projects to the reports, and how you generated that value report there. And then secondly, you said that you took information out of projects and you copy and pasted it into your spreadsheet tool and it sort of graphs it.
Okay.
Make the graphs for you.
All right.
Is that possible?
Yes, I'll show you. So let me just find the right example.
And can we make the MS project file available as well?
You can. I can, yes.
Give me the 2 files.
I think that'll be very helpful because it's a fully loaded, resource loaded file. And usually when we do training on the MS, I share those files with the guys for the purpose of learning. So I'm comfortable to do that. All right, so this is the tasks, the MS project with the tasks. Oh, I see. Sorry, let me just do this. So duplicate my screen. Okay, there you go. So this is the schedule. So if I open up these levels, you'll see it's quite in detail. So I've done that, and then I've done my resources at the resource sheet. So there are all my resources. And that I think you can all do. The assignment is extremely easy because you simply double click on an activity, and there when I go to the resources tab, I'll just assign a TLB, 1 operator, and 2 laborers to my activity. And once that's done, obviously now it spreads the cost over those activities. And then the view that I spoke about that's very important is this. If you go to the task usage view. So task usage now spreads whatever values you want to see over time. And just make sure, typically it'll give you a very big calendar, a very wide calendar. You can see there now it's daily or weekly or 2 daily. So I just always pull it back to monthly so that I've got monthly figures. It's just easier to work with. But there you can see, so each and every activity, the laying of the pipe, remember excavation, I said there's the TLB, the operator, and the general laborers. There they are. That's the hours that they are going to work and when they are going to work them. So the TLB will work 64 hours in January. Obviously the operator as well. And then those are the costs associated with it in terms of the budget. So those are my planned values. So if I roll this up into the highest level, it gives me the project values. And that's where I get those values that I use for my end value. So what I'll do is I'll take these values there, the 114 each month. So I don't take the cumulative values. That's just the way my sheet works. And then in Excel, I will open up this sheet. This is my info sheet. So I'll punch in the budget at completion there, BAC. I'll punch in the project hours. And sorry, did I show you now? There they are, that 55456. Because I've resource loaded my schedule, that's again an automatic value that I get. Those are the man hours that will be worked on this site. So I just punch that in, and there are my values, that 114453, everything. And this now I'll always, that now adds up to the total, the project value. And remember now, this is cost. So back to earned value principle. It's cost. It doesn't include any profit or VAT or anything. Because we want comparable units, so I need to just have the cost, and I'm going to measure the cost as we go. Then I have these info sheets that I've built, and here I can just go and change the date. So if it's February, I can select February or March, and it moves my cursor down. So at this stage, we are still in January. It's the first month. And then I'll just punch in the earned value and the actual value. That is what I get once I did the update. It's this update over here. So once I did the update, I'll go to my task usage again, roll it up. There are those values, actual value and earned value. So that earned value is very, very accurate if my update is accurate. Because I've said these are the activities that started, that's where we are. So it's a very objective measure. And now it calculates the cost value of the activities as they progressed. So can you see how easy MS, if you use it correctly, makes your life? So now you don't have to go and do those complex calculations of, I mean, we've got schedules that's 70,000 activities with resources. So you just can't do an exercise if I don't have this tool. So I could just roll it up, press a button, and I've got all my values. So I'll then take those values and punch it in. So obviously this is a bit tedious with the latest systems like ClickView and so on. You can actually extract the values automatically. But this is a good system if you're just starting out in using it. So there are all my values that I calculate. And then I've got a dashboard that's now linked to those values. So as I change my months, these values will change. So if I go to info and I change it will give me now a few weird numbers because we don't have information in there. But just to show you, so now everything changes to that specific month. So it's a very automatic as you can get it. So in January, I've got all my measures in, it brings those items in, and it does all the calculations for me. So this is just, I've got a bit more control. Let me show you the MS Project one. So in MS Project, you also have that function when you go to the report tab and the cost. There's the earned value report. And there you have, but you can see the graphs, doesn't display very aesthetically for me. But you can use the values, and I mean, it's accurate. So it's a quick way of getting a dashboard. You can obviously go and build this up a bit if you like, but I prefer, if I do earned value, I prefer to have more control in Excel, just for the graphs, and you can beautify it and so on. Simple. So if you can do MS, which you guys can do, you can add resources. And remember now, project management is also about understanding your specific industry. So for me, when I walk into a new project, and I've done this many times where I don't have the technical knowledge, I will rely on the project manager that sits in front of me to say, this is the technical way in which we do an app, for instance. This is the way we would develop. But as a project manager, I need to understand the fundamentals to give them a system like this that can measure accurately. I think that's the most important thing. So you don't have to have all the knowledge, but have the fundamentals, which this will provide you with. Any other questions? A cheap round for me. Thanks.